All right, everybody, welcome to our Saturday special. Very excited to get in a guy. We've had a couple Saturdays here, given some great advice. Whether you're betting, you can catch him over at DraftKings and at the Gojo Show, our good friends and partners at DraftKings. If you want to draft like a king, but it's not just fantasy. Sportsbook is unbelievable. The early lines, the team props, the same game parlays. It's from rags to riches over there, MGJ.
Rags to riches, and we are not done, certainly. Let's hope. It's been an exciting start to the season, fellas. Glad to be back here. Appreciate you having me.
Definitely, and we're already in week 5. It's going way too fast. I mean, we're almost about to be at the midpoint of college football. I want to get in one of those, I want to get like cryogenically frozen like Austin Powers when he has to go back in time and get his mojo. I wish they had that, but we don't. And there will be some kickoffs today. So as usual, I'm a co-host, David Cohn, Blaine Crane in the screen as well. Appreciate you guys joining us. Mike, I want to start off in the SEC, and we're going to move. We're going to Carmen San Diego this thing. All right. Alabama and Arkansas. The line opened. It's round 17 and a half. I'm going to go ahead and buy a couple points on it just because I can feel Alabama winning by 20 in this game. For somehow, I don't think they play as poorly as they did on the road at Texas with the penalties. Bryce Young not being able to diagnose pressure, let alone internal pressure. Looked like he was holding on the ball, and they were just befuddled. Got to give some credit to Texas. I know Arkansas secondary has been leaking like a sieve. They're beat up back there, but I just feel like they find a way to keep this game relatively close with it being in Fayetteville and being with having Sam Pittman there at the helm.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think that number is a couple of things. Certainly recency, what we saw against the Texas A&M team that I know a lot of people nationally don't respect, that especially after what we saw early on in this season. Big upset loss for them in week 3 when that carnage went on really for everybody in college football. But I also think part of this is a balancing because, like you said, that Texas game is going to stick in people's craw with Alabama for a lot longer than I think it should. Very different Texas team. We'd be talking about them differently. I think if Quinn Ewers had been healthy the whole way, there's a reason he was out there ahead of Hudson Card. I know we're concerned about Alabama skill, but I feel like the Alabama everything else is going to start to enter not underrated territory, but under talked about. And when you've got a game like that sticks in the psyche of so many people, especially bettors in the public, I think that has an effect on perception in a way that Alabama will probably go out in a race in this game, but I'm with you. I still have enough respect for Arkansas and what they have on offense to say that that's not going to be, full-scale destruction in this game because Alabama's not built right now to exploit the back-end weakness. This might be a good spot for them to get right and start to get some of those things in motion. But at this point, that's not the strength of their football team right now. This is the Bryce Young and Jahmyr Gibbs show in the backfield.
Yeah, without a doubt. And you do get JoJo Earl back, which is going to be a huge experienced receiver there to go with that young group, obviously with Christian Leary, Bond, Kobe Prentice. Tyler Harrell's a guy that's coming off a foot injury that can take it off the top there. So I'm with you. I think the transitive property people, something gets lost in translation there. Looking at a team 1 week and assuming that's how they're going to play the next week. The trick as a coach is to try and get your team up to play well every week. And when you don't play well, you just got to survive like Alabama did against Texas. Staying in the SEC, looking at 2 teams in Arkansas and Alabama that still have a lot left out there. Auburn and LSU. LSU's kind of found it a little bit. They're playing a lot cleaner than they did against Florida State. Some turnovers really cost them there. Lack of consistency on offense. Not that they're going to break the doors off of Auburn offensively. Jaden Daniels still, if you get him in a predictable passing downs, struggles to throw his way through it, even though Malik Neighbors was a guy they leaned on heavily on third down very recently. You look at this line, it's gone from 8.5 to 9. Auburn is as bad as I've ever seen them, Mike. They're as bad personnel-wise as I've ever seen them. TJ Finley's obviously beat up. The quarterback position is a disaster. Your starting center's out for 6 to 8 weeks. You're having to shuffle an offensive line that was already deficient. I think LSU wins that game. But, man, I don't think you'd be crazy getting Auburn at 10 or even 9 here and letting that play because I think it's going to be low scoring and close.
Yeah, no, I'm not seeing a lot of points in this one, but I think it is a pretty predictable outcome at this point. And whether or not you believe A.J. McCarron and his sources about the future of Brian Harsin going towards the end of this season, this is someone who we know is not long for this world down there. And whatever that game was against Missouri last weekend, I don't think it was good. It was definitely bad. It was kind of entertaining. It was just one of those things we couldn't look away from. It may have staved off elimination for another week for that coach and that program, but that well's been poisoned since this summer, since we had an attempted coup there, and nothing that's happened on the field's made it better. And quietly after that Sunday night opener, Brian Kelly does have this program, I think, more around where I expected, which is, there were going to be deficiencies up front on offense. We know that's where Brian's used to being able to have his teams operate from, but he's always going to be a really, really good CEO who understands how to raise the floor based on what resources are available to him. And I think we're starting to see that slowly work its way into the equation.
Yeah, and they have 2 freshman offensive tackles that they're playing. You know better than anyone, Mike. That's going to be – Will Campbell's very talented. The young guys they have are talented. Then you look out wide with Butte, Neighbors, who's a young guy as well. It's very interesting, and it's a nice change, I'm sure, for LSU fans to watch them get better during the season, as opposed to absolutely getting derailed and falling off a cliff. Like I said, Auburn I'm with you. It's delaying the inevitable with Harsin. Watching that Missouri game, we all got worse as football connoisseurs. Yes. We all got a little bit worse. And I think what you were describing, Mike, was a train wreck or a bad car crash when you're driving by it. You don't want to look, but deep down, you kind of do want to look.
It was the puppy who lost its way. We were
Miss Lippy, a Miss Lippy reference. Oh, yes. Please take me now, Lord. I'm ready.
May God have mercy on our souls.
Yes, very true, very true. Cone, what do you got?
Mike, let's shift to the Big Ten. I, like many others, have been quick to point out that the Big Ten West is the weaker side of that conference. And yet I look down here, and statistically, 3 of the top 5 defenses in the nation are coming from the Big Ten West. We have Iowa, Minnesota, and Illinois. Now, Minnesota really beat up on Michigan State last weekend, and now they host Purdue. Purdue has proven completely incapable of running the football, but they still have Aiden O'Connell at the helm, and they're plus 12 points right now in this game. How are you feeling about Purdue with the points?
Man, especially, and we talked about things getting stuck in your craw. I'm having a hard time unseeing the end of that Syracuse game and the way that this team buckled under pressure. I don't know, man. Minnesota might be a wagon at this point. Like, that's a team I want to spend more and more time looking at. I get Michigan State, the spot they were in. I had them the week prior, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago already, against Washington when they got dismantled. And you've got so many cracks in the foundation up front, players that they've been dealing with injury-wise, missing time up front, the back end of that defense that still cannot cover anything on this earth. So I don't want to overweight it too much, but at the same time, I think we got Purdue's best shot last year, and I think we're already seeing signs that, Aiden O'Connell and an offense that wants to just throw it around and death by 1,000 cuts with 50 dropbacks for him isn't really, in my mind, against this kind of defense, a potent recipe for keeping this thing close.
Yeah, sadly, as someone who had Purdue winning the West, I think you may be correct. Let's stay in the Big Ten. Michigan played a close one against Maryland last week, won by a touchdown. Now they are going on their first road trip of the season to Iowa, who is statistically number 1 defense in the country. I've taken every Iowa under so far this season, and I've hit. The line on this one right here is 42 on the over-under, and Michigan is favored by 11. You have any strong feelings about this game?
No, under's the right play, and that line is spot on. Michigan's going to win this game comfortably because Iowa just has no balance whatsoever offensively. And I've had to kind of figure this out in my head all year being a Notre Dame fan, because we have a very good defense that I think has at times been worn down by having to account in the early season for the offensive woes. The offensive woes for Iowa aren't going to go away. It's a flawed approach on offense. It's a quarterback that can't really do a ton for you unless you really drop down the level of competition. So for a Michigan team who I was a little surprised, and I think there were some questions from people in Ann Arbor about what your pass rush could do against big boy competition. Maryland had certainly improved things in the trenches. There's no denying what we had seen from Coach Loxley and that program in that regard. But I think for Michigan, it's a good get-right game on that front for this Iowa team. And defensively, that Iowa defense is good as sound, but they don't do a lot. Iowa sits back and plays too high. They're one of those defenses. They're the, too high 4-2 version of what we see with the 3-3-5 all over. There's not a ton of moving parts. They keep everything in front of them. They come up and they have really good tacklers who make sound plays. This Michigan offense now, especially with J.J. McCarthy, as it's become more dynamic, as it's been able to push the ball downfield a little bit more, I think eventually close for a while, and then the dam gives way, and all of a sudden you have that double-digit blowout.
Well, Cone, I think the question is, the over-under's at 42. Is Michigan going to score 42 points or not? I think that's the question.
I
with
think
Mike
the answer
too.
is no. I really do.
Yeah,
think it's
I'm with you. But Mike, looking at their defense too, it really is a keep everything in front and make you go 8 to 10. 10 to 12 plays and see if you can do that without screwing up. And look, bend but don't break, call it whatever you want. But eventually, just as a defensive guy, if I'm watching the offense and they're that bad, if I'm thinking about it as a coach, I know the players in the back of their mind, on every 3rd and 3 where they get a stop and then you come back out and it's 3rd and 2, you're like, well, does it really matter?
Yeah. No, it becomes and you know what? I should give this Michigan team a ton of credit. DNA-wise, listen, I don't know exactly who's calling the plays there at this point. I know you got multiple guys involved in the equation. Yeah, it's the New England Patriots of college football. They've just decided that we're going to go shadow theory on this. But you've got an offensive line coach, at least in theory, influencing those plays. You got a team that's O-line won the Joe Moore Award last year. I know there's different parts up front, but DNA-wise, they know how to win those games too. If you're going to try and take that stuff away, play too high like we see everyone do in the NFL and say, yeah, we don't want you to really do all this fun stuff that you think you're going to get with J.J. McCarthy now. They know how to beat you up front, and they're willing to go and win games like that if they have to.
Well, I always think you can never go wrong with an Iowa under. You can never do it. The TTP, take the under, whatever it is. If it's 10.5 or less, take the under. But hey, let's go to the Big 12, a little Oklahoma State Baylor matchup right here. Oklahoma State, 8th ranked team in the nation, and 2.5-point dogs at Baylor. I believe the over-under is at 56.5. I know Baylor's got a good defense with Coach Aranda, but I do think Oklahoma State's going to score some points. Mike, what are we feeling about this game?
Yeah, I got a chance to see up under the hood for this Oklahoma State team, and game script wise, if they can stay on the top side of things and get up early, they're a really hard team to beat. Really, really veteran group up front. I think they're at now like 110 plus starts among their front four on the defensive line. They have the reigning Big 12 freshman defensive lineman of the year. And offensively with Spencer Sanders, it's a team that if they could sit and zone read you to death, and when I think they really start to kickstart things, they get in that rhythm. They've got a quarterback who's an absolute sidewinder when he gets moving in the running game. You don't want to, if you get behind, you're in trouble, because if he's putting the ball in the air 25 plus times a game, a couple of those are going to the other team. But I like them in this one. I think that offensive line and rushing attack have gotten going. I think Sanders is a huge part of why on that. And I think this is one of those teams that's going to make things really interesting down the stretch of the Big 12 season. We know Oklahoma stubbed their toe against Kansas State last weekend, but they're such a tough out on the other end because they're never out of a game. They're never going to need time of possession on their side. They're such a big play engine that Oklahoma State and Oklahoma are still the two teams I look at in the Big 12 and think could be standing there at the end in Texas when it's all said.
I'm really liking Oklahoma State money line, Kentucky money line for this. I don't know why, but I'm really
Blaine, but what do we, and thank goodness Mike's been able to see them and they are veteran, but do we really know on the field with this Oklahoma State team what we're getting yet this year? I feel like with Baylor, you're a little bit more tested with who you've played. I've seen you against Iowa State. I've seen you against BYU, but I guess, Mike, that's where the veteran leadership, Spencer Sanders, who's played in a ton of games there, Mike Gundy, who's really transformed Oklahoma State, and really the way Dave Aranda's transformed Baylor from teams that spread you out and want to win a shootout to teams that mush you in and just want to run you over. So I think that could end up being the best game of the weekend, just from a style and finish standpoint.
Yeah, it's a true testament to where the Big 12 has gone as far as an offensive to a defensive league, right? Yeah. You have what Oklahoma State was, and we know a lot of that was Jim Knowles last year, but coming over now, certainly no slouch on that side of the ball. And for Dave Aranda being the defensive, computer brain that's come over there and done that at Baylor. No, I think that's the part of it too. Baylor's offensive line is one I love turning on. They're one of the best outside zone teams usually in college football. But when you've got 4-down defensive linemen that can raise as much hell as the guys at Oklahoma State can, that's a good neutralizer for that. You've got a linebacker groom and a secondary in the middle that's breaking in some new guys, lost some key veteran starters from last year, but they've had time to do that and make splash plays when they have to because the guys up front handle business so much. And in college football, it's not a hard equation more often than not. If you're built better along the lines of scrimmage, you got a chance to wax most teams in this game until you get to the upper crust.
A squared plus B squared equals C squared.
Amen.
I love it. All right, Mike, let's go to the ACC, NC State versus Clemson. Thing about me, I'm listening is, can DJU do it again? You saw what he did against Wake Forest. Actually looked like a competent quarterback, but that defense for NC State and Wake Forest, I promise you, aren't even close to equal. I believe this game's at -7.5 versus Clemson, over under 43. I mean, I don't think you'd be wrong to put a little money line, sprinkle a little bit on NC State here.
No, they can keep it close, but NC State, for me, it's always going to be a question of what do they do when the lights are actually on. And I know last year was big for them in terms of their relationship with Clemson and how this series has traditionally gone. But last year's Clemson team was beaten down in a way we hadn't seen. DJ was a quarterback that I firmly believe was dealing with something akin to the yips last year. I mean, that was a guy that wasn't able to hit flares to the running back, wasn't able to hit those wide receiver smokes on the line of scrimmage. It was hard to watch, and he's a much more confident player. The defense is still so talented in the front seven, and I think that NC State has lost a lot. I mean, we saw them in some close games early in the season, ECU giving them all they can handle. I just think that's a team that, yes, Devin Leary, good veteran quarterback, but I still have questions about, all right, yeah, the defense is great. And again, awesome linebacker room, probably my favorite linebacker room in the ACC, but when it starts to really shine, all right, we need plays made on offense. Your biggest playmaker from last year is gone, one of your best wide receivers in school history in Emezi. And now on offense, running back room, different guys this year. You had lost Ike Ekwonu on the left side of that offensive line. It's just all different enough to me to where I go, all right, against Clemson's best up front, when you're asked to make plays, Clemson finally stepped up and was able to make some of those last week. And you can say, yes, they're low percentage throws down the field that DJ was hitting to Ngata and those guys, but those were things in the past that had traditionally been a part of winning Clemson football. And if you start to bank some of those in key moments on the road for a quarterback who dealt with confidence issues last year, I don't think that's a small thing.
No, I agree. I like it.
Yeah, Mike, I just got a couple more for you, a little rapid fire here, just what you think about these games. Kentucky going to Ole Miss. We get to finally see Ole Miss a little bit against, a team that can walk and chew gum at the same time. No disrespect to our buddy Jeff Collins, former coach at Georgia Tech, but when you look at that schedule, it's just the truth. Then, Kentucky to me is a little bit of fool's gold. If you really watch how it's gone this year with Miami, Ohio, you needed a kick return, a pick six, struggled a little bit last week with a Northern Illinois team that is scrappy. They know how to play football up there in DeKalb. Been up there and watched them many times, coached against them before. But when I look at Kentucky without Wan'Dale Robinson, they almost just have to out-clean you. You have to play solid, hope the other team screws up. We saw Florida do that, especially in the second half, letting Kentucky stay in that game. Can Kentucky score enough points on the road to beat Ole Miss?
I think they can. I trust Will Levis enough at this point, but I'm not gonna lie. This game is the most confusing game on the weekend.
I'm not touching it. I'm telling you right now.
I wouldn't go near it. I'm just excited to use it because, like you said, to me, Kentucky is a very good team. They're not a great team. They're not going to be in any meaningful conversation about teams that we see at the top of the SEC, that range that some people are starting to inch Tennessee more towards after what we saw last week against Florida. But they're at least going to be, like you said, a good yard marker for where this Ole Miss team is. New quarterback, new coordinator, all the changes we've seen there. One of the biggest transfer portal teams in the country. I guess I'm excited on that front, but man, I'm kind of with you. I don't know what to do with this Kentucky offense other than to say, I know Will Levis can make a bunch of plays, but it doesn't look as purposeful as it did last year. Yeah. And there's a ton of change to explain why.
Yeah. Well, Wan'Dale Robinson was a huge fixer in any situation last year. He ran down more deep ball. He caught more deep balls by running them down and adjusting than I think anybody. He's Kenny Lofton, man. If you really go back and watch it, Will would underthrow him. Will would overthrow him. Will would miss inside. He'd miss outside. And I'm not saying Will's a bad player. Will have a chance to play in the NFL. But Wan'Dale made him right a lot, especially on third down. And he was the guy who got explosive plays that opened it up for Ali and then C-Rod, who's back this year, who's been reinstated. Then real quick, my lock of the week is Mississippi State -2.5. I got it. I bought it down a point when it was at 3.5. It's at 4 now. We'll see some fluctuation there. But, man, I just don't think A&M, even with the improvement with Max Johnson at quarterback compared to Haynes King, who was literally in the panic room with Jody Foster just looking for food to see how long they could last. When I look at this game, I don't think they're going to drop the passes they dropped last week. I don't think they're going to drop the punts they dropped last week at LSU. They're at home with the Cowbells. Mike Leach is running the ball more than we've ever seen. Yeah. Is he evolving to the second stage of the Pokemon? Going a little bit, a little Squirtle to War Turtle, action right there. What do you think about this game?
I really am terrified to think about what sort of stone or evolutionary tool you would have to hand to Mike Leach in order for him to evolve.
It's the Poke Flute. It's got to be the Poke Flute.
It's the same flute that everyone's mad Lizzo is playing at the Library of Congress. They gave that to Mike Leach, and he decided to try and drink beer through it.
Love it.
Yeah, no, I agree. Mississippi is the kind of team that's an absolute nightmare for a team that's looking to try and build momentum, because they're like playing a triple option team. That's all the air raid is, right? Is just a throwing triple, and having to prepare for that in a given week, and having to ask your defense to be patient, right? A defense that's changed year to year with Elko now the head coach at Duke, asking them to be patient and to just sit back and come up and play everything. I heard someone say this on the other side about quarterbacks, that quarterbacks get bored every once in a while. They want to take shots and take chances. And when they can't, they get frustrated, and that's when mistakes happen. Yeah. When you got a defense full of guys that are highly touted players and 5 stars and part of these great recruiting classes, they want to get after it and make plays. They don't want to just be told to sit there and wait for this to come to them and keep everything underneath. And so I think that's what makes Mississippi State always a kind of schematic mismatch and a schematic nightmare for a team like this.
Well, I've told David Cohn this on many occasions. The greediest people on the planet are offensive coordinators and quarterbacks, and that will always be the truth.
He has said that.
Definitely. Y'all got any parting thoughts for Mike here?
Yeah, last one. There's an academy game. We got Navy at Air Force. So, the air and the sea going at each other here. What do you think about Navy at Air Force?
Man, watching Navy this year has bummed me out a lot. It's just been a real tough sell here. So, I'll always tune in. I have stopped expecting things from Navy at this point. Coach Ken is one of the greatest men in college football, but at this point, the games that I've seen from them this season have not been something that inspires any bit of confidence in me.
Yeah. Well, how ironic is it that you're having Air Force play the Navy and it's air and sea, but the game will be decided on the ground? I find the irony in that is quite delicious. Blaine, what do you and your beard have to say?
Oh, Mike, why would I not put all the money on that I have on Georgia minus 24.5 against Missouri?
Yeah, no, listen, Missouri up front, as far as like a toughness and a grit along the lines of scrimmage, is a non-existent fighter at this point. And also, I heard Spencer Hall say this on the Shutdown Fullcast. The fact that we nuked Georgia's one kind of mistake-filled game or game where they let someone hang around too much against Kent Bleeping State, worst nightmare. Absolute worst nightmare, because Kirby's made of that Nick Saban stuff, and he's going to let those 5 stars hear it all week long. They are going to do terrible things to Missouri this weekend, and I'm not going to watch out of fear of what I see.
Yeah, well, you're going to have to get the guys from First 48. I mean, there's, the 3 things you don't want to play is somebody that's huge, fast, and pissed, and Georgia's going to be all 3 of those. Mike, great stuff as usual, my friend. The Gojo Show, it's absolutely fantastic. DraftKings, mutual partners there. Tell everybody where they can find the Gojo Show. You guys do a really good job.
Yep. Check us out. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods, on the DraftKings YouTube channel. Also, we got the Gojo with Mike Golic Jr. playlist on there. Come check us out. We try and have a good time.
No, y'all do. It's great stuff. Everybody go check them out. Make sure you like and subscribe. Enjoy your football watching, and hope everybody is safe and recovering from the storm down there in Florida. Make sure you check us out. Got a Sunday recap NFL preview in the morning starting at 8 Central, 9 Eastern. That's 1:15 Beijing time. So make sure you check that out. We appreciate you guys. We'll catch you tomorrow.